welcome to RVATECH's first Small Business Monday. My name is Lori Jennings, and I am a small business owner. I have a company of one, Jennings Pro Search, which is an IT executive recruiting firm. So needless to say, my business is definitely slowed to a halt right now. Also, I am on the RVATECH board and have been involved in programming for the last 15 plus years. Most recently as the data science chair, and we just hosted that event. That was the last event we hosted on March 11th, which was less than 4 weeks ago. And what a difference those weeks have made. That was the day that COVID, we had the first COVID case diagnosed in Richmond. And I think after that, everybody started to work from home and realize, wow, this is happening. And I think over those weeks, if you're like me, you've had so many different emotions, from disbelief in the beginning to depression, a lot of anxiety, some excitement and hope, and just a wide range. And I think it's going to continue to change as we go through these next weeks until we can see ourselves through it. So the goal of Small Business Monday is to offer a sense of community for anybody out there, whether you're a small business or you're an independent contractor. Maybe you're somebody that's been unemployed, or I don't know, you're working in sales. It doesn't matter. This is an inclusive environment. We want everybody to be here, to be part of this community, and just so we can share experiences. Today, Andrea and I are going to talk about the immense challenges ahead for businesses and employees as we go through this. This is really hard. It's really scary. And so that's what we're here to talk about. You're going to notice throughout that you can chat if you want with each other. You can also just chat with us. We're also asking, if you want to ask questions, you can. We will get to those after we have some conversation, and we'll kind of filter in some of the comments that are being made. We ask that if you have any ideas that you want to share with people about resources, you do that during this time. With that, I'm going to get started by introducing Andrea. On the here you see Andrea Goulet. She is the CEO of Corgibytes, a software company that modernizes software applications to make them more stable, scalable, and secure. Named by LinkedIn as one of the top 10 professionals in software under 35. This was just a couple years ago. Andrea
squeaked in
just a little bit. Andrea's empathy-focused approach to improving software has been featured in prominent industry publications such as First Round Review, Hazel Minutes, and Software Engineering Daily. She's the founder of Legacy Code Rocks and a host of podcasts about what we can learn to love about legacy code. She also is a sought-after keynote speaker and the author of 2 courses on LinkedIn Learning, Agile Software Development in Remote Teams, and Creating an Agile Culture. Her 2 most popular keynotes are Communication First, or Communication is Just as Important as Code, and Empathy is a Technical Skill. If that's not enough, she has spare time, believe it or not. Andrea enjoys blogging about the intersection of social science and software. She loves watching her kids explore the world and is a sucker for a good physics documentary. That one I found interesting. I'm more like a Tiger King type documentary person. So we definitely have different
I've watched my fair share of Tiger King, don't get me wrong though. Yeah. But yeah, give me some Nova, or I have a subscription to the great courses and masterclass. I love people at the top of their game, sharing their craft and learning how the world works. All that stuff just fascinates me. So yeah.
See your JavaScript tattoo on your wrist. That's part of, you said you can recognize.
Yeah, that's here. You guys can probably see it. So yeah, this I got a few years ago, actually, after pretty much every software conference I went to, everybody asked if I was a recruiter. And I was like, no, I code and I own a software company, nothing against recruiters, but that was just their first impression of me, because I think probably because I'm gregarious and outgoing. And I got sick of people asking me, do you know how to code? That was the first question people asked me right out the gate. And I also got this for me. So this is a when this calls, it's called an empty parameter. So there's nothing inside the parentheses. And it comes back as undefined. So it means I can be whatever I want. So whenever I'm like feeling self-doubt, feeling like I don't belong, feeling like I don't know what to do next, I can look down and say, you know what, my life is not carved in stone, and I'll figure this next thing out. So yeah, it's
Well,
both
thank you.
personal and it's been useful, because yeah, when I shake my hand, people don't ask me if I know how to code anymore. So
I would never have even known what that was. So thank you for sharing. Because I am a recruiter. So now I've learned something. So why don't you start out by telling us why you feel that during times of uncertainty, a focus on connectedness, creativity, and constraints can help create a strong and resilient business.
yeah, it was interesting, because when you first reached out to me, this was actually a couple of weeks ago when RVATECH was thinking about going online. And you know, I've had several times in my life where I had an experience where I felt physically unsafe, and it was very traumatic. I had to kind of leave, and it was all very scary. I had to completely like redo my business. I've had times when my finances were completely upended. We had a large client we had staffed up for. We had doubled the size of our company overnight to take on this contract. And then as soon as we brought everybody on board, the subsidiary that we were supposed to integrate was just dissolved. And so the contract that we had just was null and void. And so we had 4 people. How do we keep them employed? You know, I've had health crises. So I think, you know, for me, I'm just kind of thinking through and thinking about how I might be able to just share some of my experience. And I know all of us have kind of tapped in and had different experiences that we're leaning on in the past in order to help us navigate what's ahead. And when I thought about the things that I've leaned on personally, I was able to synthesize it into those categories. So connectedness, creativity, and constraints. So I think for me, like connectedness in a lot of different ways. Like normally we think about other people, you know, so, you know, as a recruiter, like, you know, that's so critical. Like, how do you meet all of these new people? How do you get in a network? How do you find resources? So there's definitely the sense of community. So, you know, participating in events like this, finding people who are going through something similar or who have gone through something similar in the past, that you can get hope from, that you can learn from, that you can use as a mentor. So I think that's kind of the natural place that we go when we think of connectedness. But there's also some other places too. For me, there's connectedness to myself, where, and I really struggle with that now. This is the place where I struggle the hardest, is sitting still, journaling, like giving myself space, self-care. When I was in the experience where it was, you know, physically traumatizing, I worked with a therapist, and she was saying that it's really, really important just to slow down, like put lotion on your arms and like feel that. Because what happens is that we can get so activated from like a fight or flight perspective that we need to physically calm our bodies down. And as somebody who likes to be on the go and likes to get things done, that can feel so counterintuitive and like a waste of time. Sometimes, like, oh, I need to get good sleep. That's a waste of time. Oh, I need to exercise. That's a waste of time. I need to go outside. That's a waste of time. Like, that's the story that I tell myself. But every time that I actually do those things, oh my gosh, it's so beneficial. I come back with different ideas or a new perspective or a new way to just feel restored, that I can work in a way that's more productive. So there's connectedness to yourself and thinking about what your own needs are in order to navigate through a difficult situation. And then I think there's also like a connectedness to something even bigger, like a connectedness to humanity. And there's a great book called The Diamond Cutter that my business partner and I had read very early on in, gosh, we were maybe like 3 or 4 years in business, and we had to completely pivot. Like we were not making any money. We actually had to pay other people to for our business. And it wasn't working. And so we had found this book, and it's about a Buddhist monk who goes into business. And so what are some kind of lessons from his Buddhist upbringing that he brought to the business world? And there was a section in there that really kind of has always stuck with us, that talks about like the closed fist. And he says, you know, if you operate your life where you're trying to hold on to everything, which I think is very natural when you feel scarcity, right? It's like, there's not enough. Let me clench in and kind of hold everything. But when you do that, you can't receive anything either. And so opening up your hand and being more generous and being more giving and being more grateful in times like this, even though it feels counterintuitive, then more good stuff can come your way. And so we've tried to make that a practice too. And it's been sometimes really profound on how these tiny little connections then can generate something else. So that's kind of connectedness. Creativity is the idea that, you know, you can see things in a new way, that you're not necessarily just limited to, you know, what you've got here. So one example there is my business partner and I, after we had to completely pivot, we were sitting on the couch watching This Old House, and my business partner was like, you know, I really love remodeling code. I like, if I could do what they do on This Old House, but do that for software, I would be the happiest person in the world. And part of me was like, why didn't you tell me that 5 years ago? You know, because that was exactly what we needed for a new business model. And we wouldn't have gotten to that point had we not gone through some of the trials and tribulations that we had initially gone through. So kind of using constraints sometimes, which is kind of purposefully focusing yourself. Right now we're constrained on how much we can physically be around each other, right? So we're having to adapt to new formats. We are, you know, many of us are financially constrained, right? Revenue that was predictable has now, you know, not there. So what can we do under these new circumstances? And so those constraints can, if you can look at them in the right way, can help you to focus your creativity. The other thing about constraints is that you can put constraints on yourself. And so this was something that I did a lot when I was actually, before I got the tattoo, I would introduce myself as non-technical. And I would say, oh, I'm not technical. Well, of course, people didn't think I coded because I was using the language myself of being non-technical. So there's limiting beliefs, and there's the words that we believe and then say, and the stories that we tell about ourselves. And so just paying attention. So something like, oh, I could never learn how to code, or, oh, you know, I would never be good in business, or, you know, some of those things, those can really limit you too. So looking at those three things of how do I stay engaged with a community of people where I'm going to get resources, how do I also stay engaged so I've got the energy to navigate a situation? How do I see things from a different perspective and keep my eyes open for new opportunities? And then also, how can I be aware of constraints and use them to my advantage? And those are the three things that whatever life in business has brought my way, because, you know, there's always going to be something. I think that's the thing with business owners is, you know, you see the train coming sometimes, and it's hard. But I know for me, I like kind of knowing that I've got some sense of control, that I can change how I sell my services, or maybe how I price things, or how I pitch things, or, you know, I like that idea that I can, you know, manipulate things. So there is a lot there. So people are looking to get into business now. So yeah, so those were just kind of some of the things that you and I had riffed on a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago and thought maybe we could have just a conversation. And I see I'm not the only person who loves This Old House. It's a great
Yeah, I see
show.
that.
So, so yeah. So
Yeah, so when you and I spoke, it's been over 2 weeks ago, I think. You're like the first person I talked to and shared how scared I was because
yeah.
you were just so vulnerable with me. And just having you tell me how hard it was and how, the things you were going through, although they were a little bit different than mine because I'm a one person. So
Yeah.
I'm feeling isolated and I'm feeling there's so many things going through my head and I have no one to share that with. And so talking to you just kind of helped me. It was the
Oh,
first time I
good.
heard myself say things out. And I really appreciate your vulnerability because we talked probably for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I know your kids were running in the whole time. It was way
They
longer
may
than
run in now. So
yeah,
just a heads up.
it was so much longer than we'd scheduled. And we just had a great conversation. And I felt like I'd been through a counseling session,
Aw.
really good when I came out of it. So
Well, good.
yeah,
I'm
so
so glad that I could be there for you. And I think that's the idea too, is that if we open up, because I think everyone has been through something hard, right? And I think that's the whole idea of empathy. We think of empathy a lot as walking in someone's shoes, right? But really empathy is recognizing the emotions that someone else is feeling and not just the feeling pieces, but the underpinnings of that. And then being with them, not talking at them. And so not saying like, oh, I'm so sorry you feel this way, right? But it's really, good listening skills. And that's why I think connectedness is just such a big part of resilience, is finding places where you can reach out. And then also being open about what your own experiences are, to the extent that you feel comfortable. And that's how we get through this, because otherwise we feel like we are alone. And I've read recently that like the World Health Organization is starting to encourage people to not call it social distancing, that they're encouraging people to call it physical distancing, because the idea of like social is so ingrained in who we are as humans. We need other people. And so opportunities to connect on the phone and chat, or have conversations like this where it's just like, look, this is hard, y'all. Like, this is really hard. And we were talking about how like both of us had started our businesses at the bottom of the last recession. I joined Corgibytes in, I think, February of 2009. And it was like, all right, there's nowhere to go from up, right? That was kind of the idea. But then just in the last 2 weeks, it's like, 10 million people have gotten laid off. Like, it's so much deeper and bigger than I think anything that anyone else has gone through, kind of in our modern history. But, just kind of thinking about, okay, well, I've gotten through things in the past, and how can I take some deep breaths, be there for other people. I've got my friends that like I nurture. I do the exact same thing, right? I had my friend the other day that I called and I was like, I'm going to be on this webinar and I don't feel like I have anything to contribute or say. Am I really the right person to be talking about this stuff? Right. And I think that's the thing, is that all of us are both reaching out and receiving. And I think that's the idea of the open hand, is being there for other people, but then also learning to let that information and let those feelings in. So
yeah, exactly. So what are your biggest struggles right now? You and I kind of talked about it, and you and I had kind of different struggles,
yeah.
but some of the same ones, but also some different ones. So
Yeah, I think now my biggest struggle, so I've got a team of 20. I started as a solopreneur, and and then it was just Scott and I for a long time, my business partner. And then Scott and I also got married a few years after running our business together. So now I've got 2 kids at home and we're both running meetings. He's got a deliverable right now. And so it's like, how do we like set expectations and still deliver what we need to? Because we've got 20 people who are trying to make sure that we keep our clients happy, and so that we don't have to lay anyone off. Like how do we plan for things? And so for me, I think the pressure is a little bit different now than it was when I was a solopreneur, because when I was by myself, it was like like I sold my car. I was like, oh, I need some capital. Okay, I'll sell my car and ride a scooter for a year and a half. And I did that, right? And I don't know that I have that autonomy now. And there's just this added pressure of, other people and their families that is keeping me up at night. And am I going to be able to get that next client? Am I going to be able to position myself where I can, navigate this and be of best service? I think also, like, how do I position myself as someone who does good work in this kind of environment? I don't know, like, as somebody who comes from sales and marketing, normally it's like, oh, here's how the positioning is, but not wanting to feel like you're coming across as, in a way that is discompassionate or minimizes things. I think a lot about how people feel. And so I'm probably just like over analyzing kind of our messaging at this point.
No, I think that's really valid, because I've talked to quite a few people, and I think some of them might be on the call today. It's like, how do you sell? Because it's almost like you feel real awkward about it because you can't sell. But how do you keep your name out there? And what's appropriate? What can I sell? What, we're used to going to meetings and having coffee and lunch and talking, and now we're just sitting back trying to figure it out. So that's one of my struggles, is that. And then just being here alone and not having anybody to talk to. So after you and I talked, I've been very open to talking to other people.
Has it helped?
I've had some of the best conversations in the last 2 weeks, because I think when you're busy and we're all doing, IT's been great. Our economy's been great. It's a shortage of IT workers. The biggest issue we've been trying to figure out, for the last several years in recruiting is, how do we find the talent? And that's monopolized our conversations and our thoughts. And now it's changing. And, my biggest thing, the first thing I had to do is figure out how to use video and how to get a monitor, and just all this stuff. It's kind of simple. I'm in IT, but I'm a salesperson. I'm not an IT person. And that was really scary. This is my first webinar, by the way. And
you're doing so good.
And this scared me to death. But at the same time, it forced me, like you said, the constraints, it's forcing you to do things that you normally wouldn't do, that probably will better your business in the long run, because it's coming. And so that's just how, I've been feeling. Let me see. Are there any ways that you're pivoting right now, or are you still trying to figure this out?
Yeah. I mean, we had a huge pivot before, like I had mentioned with this old house. Currently right now, I think we're pivoting, not so much in the services that we offer, because I think that, modernizing software is something that, is, as long as we're using software, there's kind of the need for that. So we haven't seen as big of a dip. We've definitely have had some clients who have been really impacted, and so therefore, like, have had to slow down or completely stop their work with us. But there are others, like we have the National Institute of Health, for example, as a client, and so they're pretty stable, and we've got a contract with them, and I think that's going to continue to go forward. So I think for me, the biggest pivoting is mostly in positioning. For a long time, I've talked about like the diversity of clients, and that was something that after that, like, we had 80% of our business wrapped up kind of in that one client that we ended up losing, kind of through no fault of our own, just like that's the way the world works. And so that was a huge lesson for me, that if I keep everything client-wise in kind of one industry or one type of client, that can be really risky. So I had set forth the mandate that no one client would make up more than 30% of our portfolio. I did that a few years ago. And that has helped us, honestly, because then, some clients are hit really hard, but other ones actually need more work. So we've been able to kind of move some resources around. So now we're thinking through, okay, what more, I think kind of what industries we're targeting. So I would say it's not so much of pivoting from maybe the core of our business, but in terms of how do we sell, how do we market ourselves, how do we talk about what we're doing, those kinds of things. But yeah, but have definitely had to do a hard pivot, and it was for the best.
Yeah, so this is a good topic. I think a lot of us are thinking about the idea of how do we sell right now? What's appropriate? If anybody that's on here wants to make some comments or wants to throw in a question, please do. I am following some of this. Let's see.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks
That was
for
nice,
commenting
Brian.
too.
Yeah. So let's just ask this one. As a leader of a remote team, I'm starting to ask some, ask some of these questions. As a leader of a remote team, what are some ways you can facilitate asynchronous connectedness?
Yeah. So this is something that we realize that we're doing a lot. So we've been working remotely for about 5 years, where our entire team is completely distributed. So when everybody else was trying to figure out how to work from home, like we were like, this is our normal daily work. So there's a whole course on LinkedIn that you can look up. If you look up my name and then remote teams, it should come up. But the biggest thing I think is to have rituals where you're thinking about other people. And so, kind of the exercise that we had done was walk through all of the pieces of a day at the office, and how can we replicate that in a digital way. So for example, opening the door creates creates kind of this moment of like, I am now at work, right? So like the opening and the closing of a door. And so, we have a channel where people just say hi and bye, right? And that might seem kind of silly, but at the same time, it's a start and a close to our day. And I noticed that when I use that channel, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so busy, I just kind of like jump into emails and Slack. But when I take the time to actually like sit down, say hi to my teammates, then it's like, okay, the day has started. And same thing, when I say bye, then I'm like, oh, I'm done. Like, and I can have that kind of mental break. And then it's also, we've got some things with, automation. Like there's a tool called Slackbot that you can set up on Slack for automated responses. So we've got kind of a populated, have an awesome day. So if you type in good morning, then you'll get an automated response. And it's kind of almost like a receptionist who's, waving hi to you. We do daily stand-ups. So we post those in Slack so that people know what each other are doing. We have a team retro at the end of every week. And we do that in person, like on Zoom synchronously. And then that way it reminds us that we're part of a bigger team. I think that's probably one of the hardest things about working on a remote team, is that you can get really isolated really quickly, and you can forget that you're kind of part of this bigger initiative. We also use, this happened with Scott, because I kept bugging him saying, hey, you got a sec. And it drove him crazy. And from like my background, I was like, well, that's how everybody works. Like, but I was working in, more marketing and advertising, kind of everyone was context switching all the time. But for software developers, usually they need like very deep focus time. And if you say, hey, you got a sec, then it can break them out. And so Scott was like, I was 9 Inception layers down when you said that. And I had seen the movie Inception, the Chris Nolan movie, and it's like a dream within a dream within a dream. And he's like, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get back. And I was so close to the solution. So one of the things we do now is like, we use that as an opportunity to figure out, okay, well, how can we negotiate working together? Because I'm going to need to figure out and interrupt you and say, hey, are you available? I need your opinion on something, or I need you to contribute your ideas. And so he said, well, just ask me to label it. So now we say Inception ? Is a direct message if we need someone. And then somebody just calls back a number. So if it's 12, it's really high, right? Don't bug me. And it's like, okay, well, that I'm looking for you. So, but if it's like a 1, it's like, great, let me know when you're ready. And, I need you for something. But then that way it's like, it takes the cognitive load off. So we've found kind of some of these ways to just kind of navigate that terrain of working remotely, but at the same time being able to interact as a team. So
Thanks. So let's get back to marketing, because I've had a few people in the chat box talk more about
yeah.
how do we sell? How are you marketing? And you've done a great job before this. I mean, I've seen you out there speaking on LinkedIn. I've called you and said, how do you do this? So you're someone I look up to already, and in kind of the ways you've been selling yourself. And you talked about how your roles changed. You hired a salesperson. You mainly did speaking engagements.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts in this area?
Yeah, this is a place where kind of I'm thinking through things. So, and I saw somebody asked about being a social media influencer too.
Yeah.
And so I think this kind of comes into it. So, I'm working with someone who consults on LinkedIn, Judy Fox. I actually think I saw her in the chat.
She was in there.
But yeah, so I'm working with people to figure out like, how can I be that person? Because I don't know. For me, it's so interesting. Hi, Judy. So like we had said, well, maybe I can record like a 1-minute video, right? Like I typically write these like really long form, like big thought kind of pieces, but they take a lot of time. And so the idea was, well, maybe like I can just walk down the street and kind of record a 1-minute video. And maybe that's how we pivot and position, is maybe with the medium of it. And I tried for an hour and I nearly spun myself into a panic attack. Like just, it's not natural for me. It doesn't like, which is interesting because you would think that me being on a webinar and me talking to people, but I like having kind of a space to expand on an idea. And if I feel like I have to get everything into like 1-minute clips, just it feels a lot of pressure. So I think some of it is trying to just lean into what you're naturally going to be good at and not trying to pressure yourself to be something that you're not. Like I'm not on Instagram, like just not my thing. And I know a lot of my friends love it, but LinkedIn has kind of always been my home. I've been on there since 2005. So I'm focusing a little bit more on kind of trying to go deeper in one network rather than like spreading myself too thin. And I think that's especially important when you are constrained with your time. Because right now it's like, all right, I've got, my business to make sure that I'm running and really making sure that I'm running a tight ship. And then I'm trying to homeschool my 7 and 4-year-old and make sure that they don't, burn the house down. So for me, kind of adding that extra layer, like I think it's great to experiment and try something. And it's like, well, that didn't work. All right, let me try something else. So I think that's a big piece of it, is incorporating that idea of experimentation. For us in terms of messaging, we are taking a very empathetic approach to selling, which is not off base of what we do normally. I talk all around the world about how to do this. So for us, it's about really being a resource and listening. And, we're doing some outbound now where, people who are saying we need help fixing this system, because there are companies that are saying, oh my gosh, there's more demand than ever and we didn't design for this. And so, my team could come in and provide some assistance. And so kind of listening to people who are saying, I need help, and then coming in just as a resource and saying, even if we're not the right fit, let's connect and I'll listen to what your challenges are and I will point you in the right direction. And I think that's something in sales that I've always looked at. I've never looked at sales as a transaction. I've always looked at it as a form of customer service, as how can I help you? And even if my solution that I'm trying to, generate isn't going to be the right solution for you, let's still connect. So I think that it's, spending way more time listening and asking questions and understanding, and then, kind of being available to just point people in the right direction. And if you just continually do that and, find people who are struggling and offer to genuinely be there, like not trying to pitch anything, but just listen to somebody's challenges, and then be somebody who genuinely offers a solution, whether or not it's yours or something else, like people remember that. And so that's kind of the sales methodology that I've always leaned on. So I think we're more just kind of formalizing that and, you know, training people on my team who are focused on sales that, you know, this is something we want to do more of and be very much more intentional about it. But that's kind of always been the way that I've sold. So
That's
yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, this is just something, you know, because we can't get together. I've had a couple clients say, God, I wish we could get together for coffee just to talk. And so something I've done, and which is also helpful for our physical well-being and our mental well-being, is walking. Especially now, this week's going to be beautiful. I'm inviting clients, friends. A lot of times that line is blurred because my clients are my friends, so it's so nice. But I'm inviting them to go to walk for about an hour, and we're just talking about everything. It's a way, instead of having coffee, you're still connecting and you're staying 6 feet apart. Now it sounds like we have to wear masks. This weekend, everybody had a mask on. So
yeah, I Googled, like I brought out my sewing machine and was like, you know, and again, that was kind of in a weird way. I was like, okay, let me be creative. Like I made a quilt when my son was born, and then I don't think I brought my sewing machine out since. And it was like, oh, okay, I can learn this. But it was more of like a grounding kind of thing. But yeah, I've been doing the walks too.
the
I didn't
walks
mean to
with
interrupt you.
clients. No, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, it's just something you don't think about. But you
Yeah.
can meet. Like it just came to me when he says, I wish there was a way we could just go sit on a bench. There are probably some benches out there too, but you know, finding a quiet spot is hard right now because everybody's out with their
Yeah.
kids. So that's the challenge that I have found a spot where I'm walking. Yeah, that's been my thing. And I also try to do that video that you mentioned. I bought a tripod with I've never done a video.
Yeah.
I could not think about what to say in 1
It's
minute.
hard.
It is the hardest thing, is narrowing down, because I think you and I are both very talkative and animated, and getting all of that, in 1 minute is almost impossible. So I spun around with that for a couple of days. It just didn't work for me. So
Well, and I think that's the idea, is like you continue to try things, right? And I think
yeah,
having that culture of experimentation and continuous improvement is so important, because if it's so, you tried with the walking and with your clients, and you're like, oh, this is great, let me do more of it, right? Or the
yeah,
video, like that was really anxiety inducing, I think I'm going to hold off on that, or maybe try it in a different way. So I think that's the idea, is trying small things, tossing it out there, and I think that's where that creativity comes in, is, well, maybe I'll do this. Well, maybe I'll try this. I don't know. And I mean, sometimes you can build a whole business out of that. I mean, that was like with Corgibytes, when Scott made that comment about legacy code, he was like, I just want to fix bugs all day. And I'm like, really? Like, I know there's a need out there, but I was like, are you the only crazy person in the world who likes doing this? Like, because I've never, ever heard somebody say that they love it before. And we ended up building a whole community. That's our podcast, the Legacy Code Rocks community. There's a whole group of people who love fixing bugs and love spending time, paying down technical debt and improving legacy code. And if I had continued to push the company in a direction that, was set out in our business plan originally, but didn't work, I think that was kind of the idea, was, well, we'll see if we can get some clients. And then, once we got more demand, it's like, well, we'll see if there's anybody else out there who likes doing this. And I think I'm still running my business that way. It's, now we're getting ready to do a conference, like a online conference, MenderCon 2020. And I think it's going to be May 14th. So yeah, the idea is like, well, let's give it a shot, right? And I think that's something that, even when times are good, you want to have that culture of experimentation. But I think sometimes when those constraints kind of fall in on you, it forces you to enact on those experiments, whereas before you may have been a little bit more complacent. And like you said, it's like, oh, I'm so busy, I've got this and that, and whatever. And it's like, no, I really need to get on this and try it. And sometimes, like, the most amazing things can come out of that.
Yeah, I believe that. I've been wanting to put a new marketing plan together, update LinkedIn and all of that, and have been holding off. And this is exactly what I'm going to be doing during this time.
Okay.
Now, Tell us about Judy Fox. Is that somebody you've hired when you?
Yeah, so she's here in Richmond.
Yes.
So yeah, so
Do
she's
you, do you recommend somebody talking? Is she a marketing and branding person or?
yeah, so she specializes in LinkedIn. She's a
Okay.
social media influencer. She's fantastic. I've given her a review, so big shout out to Judy. Yeah. So
Oh,
she's
really?
got,
She's the one that helped you with your LinkedIn profile?
yeah, so she has a program called the business 12-week business accelerator. So she's been working with our team. So I had already had a pretty good LinkedIn following because I had written some articles that went viral. I had one article in First Round Review hit #1 on Hacker News, which is basically like being listed on Oprah's favorite things in the technical world. So I got all these, kind of followers overnight. But I wasn't really figuring out how to connect with them. Like I knew how to use LinkedIn from kind of like a connection approach where like I had met someone and kind of maintaining existing people, but I hadn't really thought about using it to find other people or connect in a more intentional way. And so, Judy and I connected about a year ago, and we've been working together. We're also friends. I went over and helped organize her closet. I hope that's okay. Say, Judy. But just like, that's kind of one of those connectedness things was, she and I just like really hit it off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, well, let's see how we can just help each other. And then, kind of opportunities, help each other. And, I wasn't able to hire her right away. But that's been good. And so she's helped me kind of position things a little bit better and kind of think through what is my voice on LinkedIn, because this sounds, I don't know, like I struggle with having kind of a broader audience and kind of having that term influencer. To me, I like to talk about what I like to talk about. And sometimes those things are influential, but I'm just so nervous. And I think that's some of the things that I'm working through now is making sure that my kind of online presence is genuine and kind of who I really am, and just being very intentional. So Judy's a good coach who's helping me kind of think through some of those things.
Right. Yeah, I see some comments on here that she's the best. I'm going to reach out to Judy too. Hey, Judy,
yeah.
Because something I need to do, I as a recruiter talk to people all day long about how they need to improve their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And yet I'm such a hypocrite because I've spent very little time on it over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And
it's an interesting platform, but there's so much there.
Yeah, yours, getting to know you over the last couple of years, I think yours does speak to who you are. Very genuine.
Thank you.
So it's a good job.
Oh,
good
thanks.
job, Judy, if she's helped you. And I think you said you're going to be sharing some of these resources.
Yeah, I was going to
follow up after.
Yeah, for the folks who registered, I was going to just put together an email with some, resources kind of that I've put together around the idea of connectedness and creativity and constraints. So maybe some blog articles and podcasts and books and things, because I tend to collect some of those ideas. So maybe just kind of categorizing them and putting them out. So if folks find that useful.
Yeah, audience, if y'all are out there, please list some thoughts what you've been doing. If you have any, if you've had any great ideas on what you want to, what you're doing to sell and market during this time, or any resources that you've come across, please list that and we'll shout it out and hopefully include that in our follow-up to everybody.
Yeah, so Chad had a question here. Could being a social media influencer help in the new world of social distancing as a small business that can keep connection, creativity, and income regardless of pandemics? Could one of the most secure jobs in our new world post-COVID-19, and it didn't exist a decade ago? I think so. Yeah, I think so for sure. I think I never would have thought, that I would be the CEO of a company that specializes in remodeling software, right? For example. And like, if you had asked me, 10, 15 years ago, if I thought this was where I'd be, no way. Right. But I think that that's part of it is, and I'm always wary. I think this is the difference, is that if you're following that kind of path and you're sharing what you're genuinely interested in, like for me, the technology world needs more empathy. I understand empathy on a very technical level because of my background in marketing and copywriting. And so therefore I am taking skills that I know and teaching them to engineers and CTOs. And that to me feels very authentic and very congruent. So I think some of it is figuring out like, what are your strengths? Where can you genuinely make a difference? What are the new intersections that are happening as a result of kind of our changing landscape? And then figuring out where you plug in. But I know for me, if I've ever set out with the idea of I'm going to be a social media influencer, I think I've never personally succeeded there. I've been told that I'm more influential when I am genuinely talking about something that I'm genuinely interested in. And so that would be my suggestion, is to think of, you know, you're an influencer because you're fostering connectedness, you're encouraging other people to be creative, you know, you're thinking through your own constraints and pointing things out to other people. So I do think that people sharing their stories and sharing their ideas and is a great way to be a resource. You know, I think that's the thing, is we're not selling at people, right? We're offering help and resources, and, you know, how can I be of service to you? And if you take that approach, I think, you know, you'll find more problems, first of all, because if you just listen to what people's challenges are all day, you know, like we've been doing that with our work. Like we analyze all these code bases now, and it's like, wow, I think there's some products that we could probably build, right? Because now we've seen patterns. So if you're listening to kind of what people's challenges are, you know, then you can kind of spot some of those alignments. Like, who would have thought that empathy and technology would be a place, you know, that there would be some overlap? But yeah, I think some of it is social media can definitely help with that. But I don't know. I've never personally found that setting out to be an influencer, kind of with that goal. I think it's more of an outcome of you kind of coming into your own and sharing your own story a little bit more. But that's my experience. I don't know. Other people may have had other experiences. So
No, that's great. Thank you. Let's see. I think you and I talked about, you mentioned that starting your business in 2008, 2009, your last one during the last recession was, was a good thing. It was probably beneficial. I also recently posted in January when I had my 12-year anniversary that I thought it was a blessing in disguise because of the things that we're doing now. People are more open, they're more empathetic, they have more time to talk. You get back to basics. You're thinking strategically. There's just so many good things that can come out of it. So,
yeah,
I want to leave, want to mention that because there is some hope out there. And I know
there
you
is
have.
hope. Yeah.
So what are you hopeful for?
You know, I think the thing that I'm hoping for now, like clearly it's to end as much suffering as fast as possible, right? Because I think, you know, this has opened us up to recognizing kind of just how fragile a lot of our systems have been, right? If we think about like things from logistics or healthcare or something. So, you know, my hope is that we're going to use this as a learning experience. You know, I love history so much because we can go back and we can look at things that have happened in the past and then help us kind of guard against, you know, things that might happen in the future. So my hope is that, you know, we can take the lessons like as a society and say, okay, y'all, that didn't quite work. So in order to fix that, here's some things that we're going to try to do differently. And I think that when you have a big mindset shift like that, there are going to be new opportunities that maybe people hadn't seen. Like the metaphor that's coming to my mind, this might be kind of gross, is like if you're walking on a trail and you lift up a rock, right? There's all these like worms and kind of bugs that kind of scatter around, but it's like we've basically just kind of disturbed a big section of how society was working. And like people are suffering and struggling and hurting. And I think that it's important to not minimize that. And at the same time, right, we're all going to scurry. We're all going to try to figure out our own way, and things will eventually settle, right? And so my hope is that, you know, as few people are hurt in this as possible, and that as many people can find opportunities given all of the change, and that, you know, some new businesses may even emerge as a result. One place I see, you know, Chad had mentioned about online education. So one great resource, if anybody is looking to build a career in technology. So, you know, I think software developers are always in demand. You know, you were saying, Laura, it's like there's going to be even more so. And so, you know, for somebody who's looking to make a career shift, or maybe that job that you thought was really stable isn't there anymore and you're having to reskill, the tool that I used that I absolutely loved is called Free Code Camp. So I'll include that in the resource guide, but it's a completely free curriculum. It teaches you so much. It's constantly updated. It's open sourced. It teaches you all sorts of different skills. And I know many people who have used it as a way to kind of level up their own technical skills and learn how to code. You can start just with like basics of like HTML and, you know, but then you can go all the way through to, you know, kind of more advanced algorithms and data science and things like that. So that's a fantastic resource. It's available for free. edX is also really good. They've got some classes from Harvard and other places. It's the Computer Science 101. Code.org is another place. They have the Hour of Code. Honestly, when I was first getting in, like I was like, I've got to learn how to code if I'm going to run a business of software developers. I Googled software for kindergartners, like learning software for kindergartners, like how do I learn to code? But it was like thinking of like what's marketed for children, and that can be kind of my first entry point in, because it didn't feel as intimidating. So I found like different games. There's one called Code Combat, which is like kind of a game that you play, but you're learning, you know, different tools. So I think that was an example too of just like, okay, I'm going to level up my coding skills, but you know, my constraint at the time, which I'm sure other people are feeling now, is like, I can't like uproot from, you know, I live in Richmond, and all of, you know, my parents and Scott's parents are here. We can't just uproot and move somewhere else to go to a boot camp, or, you know, I'm running a business. I can't like stop what I'm doing and go get another degree. But looking at some of those online resources where then it's like, okay, I've got 2 hours at night. Let me, you know, put some time down into learning JavaScript. That I was able to do. And so there are tons of resources. And the nice thing too with Free Code Camp is they've got infrastructure set up around learning and community. They've got, you know, different chat rooms and things so that you can connect with those other people who are in a similar situation. Because I found that was something that was crazy intimidating, was that the only people that I knew who coded were really good. And so it just kind of looked like this magic black box thing that happened behind the scenes. And I never saw anyone struggle, or at least not say it out loud. And so I always judged myself and told myself I wasn't smart enough or didn't think that I could do it enough. But going through the Free Code Camp kind of process was another thing too, that was, no, coding, learning this new skill is hard, and it's not about, you know, me not being smart or, you know, thinking in a different way. It's that, you know, just like I've developed this skill in copywriting and kind of, you know, understanding how to apply empathy in given contexts, you know, other people have dedicated a whole lot of time to being able to understand algorithms and how to make a machine, you know, do what you ask it to do. And that it's a skill set. And, you know, the more that we can kind of be open about, you know, what our challenges are and be willing to help other people, that's when we all level up too.
Great. Looks like Chad's full of questions. He's got
Yeah.
another one on the best way to manage recruiting as a business or navigating digital onboarding and hiring. Do you have any perspective on that yet? As I'm not sure there's a lot of hiring going on right now, at least not in my world that I've seen. So
yeah, I think, I mean, we will be recruiting. I think it depends on, you know, kind of client demand. And there are people out there who are hiring. For us, I have built our own in-house recruiting tool. And the digital onboarding and hiring, a resource that we found recently was called Rippling. And so we signed up for it. We just started using it, but they kind of help streamline the onboarding process. I think there's other ones for small businesses. I think Gusto is another one that claims to kind of have some of those features as well. So there are kind of tools that can help you manage it. Excuse me. But I approached recruiting very, very similar to how I approach sales, is that it's all about listening. I love interviews so much. I love meeting new people. And I think my goal in my own recruiting process at my own business is that every applicant at any point in the process will have walked away feeling like that was a good use of my time. And so when I'm thinking about how I build my recruiting kind of funnel, that's the kind of rubric. And I think it's a very, it's an empathy driven approach of, from the moment somebody kind of comes onto the website and is interested, instead of just saying, we don't have anything, we've got, a news, a MailChimp, email newsletter that says, we'll email you when the next, when we open up job descriptions. And so then that way it's like, okay, now I know. When we do open things up, making sure that our initial questionnaire is very thoughtful and kind of a good use of people's time, thinking really deeply about my job descriptions. I've used tools like Textio to kind of make sure that the gender balance is good. That's made a huge difference in, the number of women that are on my team. We've got a pretty gender balanced team. In fact, like out of the 6 leaders, like our core leadership team is 6 people. Scott's the only man. Our technical team is gender balanced as well. And then just thinking through like all of the, when we do our interviews, when we do our scenarios, when we ultimately make the hiring decision and, are going through that recruiting process, it's very much driven by empathy and the user experience. And by focusing on that and then being very clear on what our own needs are, that's helped us kind of find really good candidates. So that's kind of how I'm managing it. And then I've built tools that essentially are apps at this point. They're like massive Excel spreadsheets with all these functions and filtering and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's exactly that same thing that I said before. It's trying an experiment. How did that work? Great, let's keep doing it. Or oops, that wasn't as effective as we thought it was. Let's try something different next time. So
great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you being the guinea pig with me on this.
Yes,
this has been a great
this
discussion.
was great, Lori.
Yeah, so we want to follow up this series. It sounds like there's certain areas I think that are on everybody's mind. The marketing and sales is something that I think is driving, a lot of us.
Yeah.
It's challenging a lot of us. And, so that's going to probably be the topic of our next Small Business Monday. So we'll be reaching out and you'll be hearing more about that. From RVATECH perspective, we are doing these every day of the week. Each day has a different theme. Tomorrow's Tech Tuesday. And Rowan Mead is going to, from Synergy. She's going to be talking about Microsoft Teams and how to connect globally and her experiences in that area. And then we have the Women in Tech hosting, one on Wednesday. We have the vendors hosting one on Thursday. And I think Nick is going to be moderating on Friday with Amazon. And that's, I think, going to be dedicated to larger companies versus the small companies on Mondays.
And I think shout out to RVATECH too. I'm on the board with you, Lori. And so, Nick, I know that you've hidden your video and muted your microphone, but you're still here. And I think I wanted to give a huge shout out to Nick for his leadership because, he saw this and immediately was like, let's build some webinars. Let's Lori, you came with the idea and then it's like, let's make it happen. So I think, in this organization is a great example of let's try something. And, Lori, feeling like, I don't know, this feels uncomfortable. We don't have everything planned out. And it's a great experiment. So I think this is a good opportunity. And I think even my parents were going to join. So it's like, they've never come see me speak at, kind of one of my big things, but it was kind of neat to be able to say, no, you can be a part of this. So thanks both of you for your leadership.
Yeah, thank
and
you,
for
RVATECH
including
and
me.
Nick. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
And
everybody.
if folks wanted to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. There's not too many Andrea Goulets out there, so you should be able to find me. And then you can also email me, Andrea@Corgibytes.com, Corgibytes. Oh, I just realized it's on the little thing in the back.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. Everybody have a great week. And we'll be talking to you soon. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.